April 9th, 1241, the fields outside Legnica, Silesia. At sunrise, a terrified European army stares across the plain as 7,000 Mongol horsemen ride in eerie silence, banners snapping in the wind. The ground vibrates under hooves. Smoke drifts from burning villages behind them. Duke Henry the Pious grips his sword, surrounded by 30,000 armored knights, crossbowmen, and Templar warriors, more than 4 times the enemy's number. When the Mongol horns sound, they unleash a plan so precise, so merciless, that within hours this entire army will be dead, scattered, or burning on the field. And almost no one today knows why. Winter, 1241. Across the frozen plains of Eastern Europe, a rumor spreads like plague. The Tatars are coming. Most Europeans have never heard the name Subutai. They don't know that for 30 years this aging Mongol general has commanded armies that destroyed kingdoms from China to Persia. They don't know he's won more battles than Alexander, Caesar, or any commander in history. They don't know that when Genghis Khan's grandson Batu Khan demanded he conquer the West, Subutai designed something unprecedented, a simultaneous invasion across 2 fronts, coordinating armies separated by hundreds of kilometers of wilderness, timed to the day. What they do know is that cities are burning. Refugees flood westward with stories that sound like apocalypse. Horsemen who shoot arrows while retreating at full gallop. Armies that appear from nowhere and vanish like smoke. Commanders who communicate across vast distances through relay stations and smoke signals. Stories of entire populations slaughtered. Pyramids built from skulls. In Krakow, Duke Henry the Pious receives contradictory reports. Some say 20,000 Mongols, others say 50,000. Some claim they're barely armed savages, others swear they're demons. No one agrees on where they are or where they're going. Henry is 42 years old, devout, respected. He knows his duty. Poland cannot fall. If the Mongols break through here, Germany lies open. All of Christendom. He sends messengers racing across Silesia, to the Teutonic Knights, the Templars, the Hospitallers, to Saxon mercenaries and Moravian lords. He calls every banner, every oath, every fighting man within a week's march. By early April, 30,000 warriors gather at Legnica. It's an enormous force by medieval European standards. Armoured knights on war horses, crossbowmen, pikemen, religious orders sworn to die before retreat. Henry looks at his assembled army and feels something like hope. What he doesn't know is that Subutai has already accounted for every decision he will make. The Mongol general sits in his command tent 200 kilometers away, moving units like pieces on a game board. While one Mongol army devastates Hungary, drawing European attention south, Subutai's northern column, just 7,000 cavalry under, commanders Baidar, Kadan, and Orda, sweeps through Poland like a scythe. They don't occupy. They don't hold ground. They probe, burn, and vanish. They're not trying to conquer territory. They're herding Henry's army exactly where Subutai wants it. On April 8th, breathless scouts arrive at Henry's camp. The Mongols are 30 kilometers east, maybe less. They're moving fast. If Henry doesn't intercept them now, they'll burn Legnica itself. Henry gives the order. At dawn, they march. The army that rides east from Legnica is magnificent and terrified in equal measure. At the vanguard, armoured knights sit astride massive destriers, war horses bred for shock combat, trained to charge through infantry lines. Their plate armour gleams. Crosses mark their shields. Behind them, blocks of Polish infantry carry pikes and axes. Flemish crossbowmen march in disciplined ranks. Templar knights, warrior monks who've survived crusades in the Holy Land, ride in grim silence, white surcoats blazing in the morning sun. But look closer. Half these men are peasant levies, pulled from farms weeks ago, barely trained. Many have never seen battle. They whisper prayers and clutch talismans. The professional soldiers don't speak much. They've heard the stories too. In the night camps, arguments erupt among commanders. Some want to wait for reinforcements, King Wenceslaus of Bohemia is marching north with additional forces, perhaps only a day behind. Others insist they must strike now, before the Mongols slip away. No one can agree, because no one truly understands the enemy. European warfare is about territory, castles, sieges. The Mongols fight like water, flowing around obstacles, drowning resistance, evaporating when confronted. What Henry's scouts don't report, because they don't survive to report it, is that every movement of the European army is watched. Mongol reconnaissance screens, operating in overlapping relays 50 kilometers deep, track Henry's column constantly. Riders gallop between units using a communication system refined over decades of steppe warfare. Smoke signals rise from hills. The Mongols know Henry's strength, his route, his pace. They know about Wenceslaus, still a day's march south. Subutai's orders are precise. Isolate Henry, prevent the junction, destroy him before reinforcements arrive. So the Mongols move. Not toward Legnica, but parallel to Henry's march, always just out of reach. They burn villages along Henry's flanks, not random destruction, but deliberate. The smoke columns guide Henry northeast, away from Wenceslaus's approach. When European scouts ride ahead, Mongol ambush parties let some escape with false information. The enemy is smaller than reported, retreating, disorganized. Henry receives these reports in his tent. 7,000 Mongols, maybe fewer, running scared. His commanders urge speed. Catch them before they escape. On the evening of April 8th, Mongol riders appear on distant hills at sunset, silhouetted against red sky. European soldiers point and shout. Then the riders turn and disappear into gathering darkness. Henry's army makes camp in a state of nervous exhaustion. They've marched hard for 2 days through burned countryside. Tomorrow, they'll catch the enemy. Tomorrow, this ends. What they don't see, in the darkness beyond their campfires, are the 7,000 Mongol cavalry moving into position on terrain Subutai selected weeks ago. Subutai built his career on one principle: the enemy must want to fight exactly where you want them. While Henry's army camps in exhausted confusion, the Mongol commander sits in lamplight studying reports. His officers have confirmed terrain, wind direction, European positions. Everything aligns. The battlefield Subutai chose near Legnica is perfect. Open ground for cavalry maneuver, gently rolling hills to hide flanking forces. A single obvious avenue of approach that the Europeans will take, because it looks advantageous to them. Subutai is 70 years old. His body aches. He's been fighting since he was a teenager under Genghis Khan himself. He's destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire, crushed the Georgians, annihilated the combined Rus princes at the Kalka River. He's commanded in 40 major campaigns and never lost, not once. He doesn't underestimate Europeans. He's studied their tactics through captured prisoners and battlefield observation. He knows their heavy cavalry can shatter lighter forces in direct charges. He knows their armor makes them nearly impervious to arrows at close range. He respects their courage. European knights will die rather than retreat, which is why he's designed a trap that turns their strengths into suicide. The plan is elegant. At dawn, a small Mongol force, perhaps 2,000 cavalry, will position directly in Henry's path. They'll appear vulnerable, disorganized. When the Europeans charge, these Mongols will retreat, not in panic, but in carefully controlled withdrawal, fast enough to stay ahead of European heavy cavalry, slow enough to keep them pursuing. They'll lead Henry's army deeper into the plain, stretching the European formation, exhausting horses and men. Meanwhile, the remaining 5,000 Mongols will be hidden in 3 groups behind low hills on both flanks and rear. They'll carry smoke pots, not for signals, but for weapons. At the critical moment, when Henry's army is fully committed, strung out in pursuit, the hidden forces will close the trap. Baidar commands the right wing, Kadan the left. Order leads the false retreat. Each commander knows his role precisely. They've executed variations of this maneuver dozens of times across Asia. On the evening of April 8th, Mongol scouts confirm that Wenceslaus's Bohemian reinforcements are still a full day south, too far to intervene. The window is open. Henry is isolated. As night falls, Mongol cavalry moves silently into position. They don't light. He fires. They walk horses slowly to avoid sound. 7,000 men and mounts slip into hiding like ghosts, waiting for sunrise. In Henry's camp 3 kilometers away, soldiers sleep restlessly, dreaming of home. Some pray. Some sharpen weapons. A few desertions occur in darkness. Peasants who slip away into forest, choosing shame over the terror they feel building in their chests. April 9th, 1241. Dawn breaks cold and clear. Mist rises from the plain. When Henry's army marches east at sunrise, they see exactly what Subutai intended. A small Mongol force waiting on open ground, banners fluttering, appearing almost casual. To European eyes, it looks like the enemy has finally made a mistake. Stopped running, offered battle, given the Christians a chance to bring their superior numbers to bear. Henry gives the order. Trumpets sound. The European army advances in formation, thousands of armored men moving across the plain toward what looks like victory. What they don't see are the 5,000 Mongol cavalry hidden in the rolling hills, absolutely silent, waiting for the signal. The charge begins with trumpets and thunder. Henry's vanguard, 2,000 armored knights on war horses, lowers lances and surges forward across the plain. The ground shakes, metal clanks, war cries rise in a dozen languages. To the European commanders, this moment feels inevitable, righteous. They outnumber the enemy 4-1. Their armor can turn arrows. Their horses can crush infantry. This is what they trained for. The Mongol force ahead, perhaps 2,000 riders under orders command, seems to hesitate. Then suddenly they turn and flee. A cheer erupts from the European ranks. "They're running!" soldiers shout. "Cowards!" The knights spur harder, convinced they're witnessing collapse. This is how European warfare works. You charge, the enemy breaks, you hunt them down. Even the cautious commanders feel a surge of hope. Maybe the stories were exaggerated. Maybe these Tatars aren't demons after all. But the Mongols aren't panicking. They're performing a maneuver drilled into every steppe warrior from childhood. The feigned retreat, the mangudai. Orders cavalry withdraws at precise speed, staying just ahead of the European charge, leading them exactly where Subutai planned. As they retreat, Mongol horse archers twist in their saddles and fire backwards, the famous Parthian shot, sending arrows into the pursuing mass. Most arrows bounce off plate armor, but some find gaps. A knight takes a shaft through his visor slit and tumbles screaming from his horse. Another's mount goes down with an arrow in its neck, throwing its rider under the hooves behind. The European charge doesn't stop, can't stop. Momentum carrying thousands of men and horses forward in a rolling avalanche of metal and flesh. Henry watches from the center with growing dread. His vanguard is pulling too far ahead, leaving infantry behind. The formation is stretching, fragmenting. He shouts orders, but his voice disappears in the roar. Dust clouds rise, choking visibility. The Mongols keep retreating, and his knights keep chasing, and the distance grows. Then, 3 kilometers into the plain, the Mongols stop running. Orders cavalry wheels around in perfect formation, as if connected by invisible strings. They don't look disorganized now. They look like what they are. Professional soldiers executing a plan. Mongol horns sound, deep and terrible, echoing across the field. 2 more horn calls answer from the hills. Left flank. Right flank. In that moment, Henry understands. His blood goes cold. He's not chasing a retreating enemy. He's led his army into the center of a trap. From the low hills on both sides, 5,000 Mongol cavalry emerge like a flood. The encirclement happens faster than thought. Baidar's wing sweeps in from the right. 1,500 horsemen in tight formation, moving at full gallop. Kadan mirrors from the left with equal force. They don't charge straight in. They curve inward like closing jaws, cutting behind the European vanguard. sealing them off from the infantry still struggling forward through dust. The sky goes dark with arrows. Mongol composite bows, refined over centuries, engineered for maximum power, send shafts in massed volleys. Not aimed shots, but blanket fire into concentrated European formations. Arrows hit horses, pierce mail at joints, find eye slits and gaps in armor. A Templar knight takes a shaft through his throat and drowns in his own blood inside his helmet. A Polish nobleman's horse collapses, pinning him screaming beneath half a ton of dying animal. Henry's vanguard tries to respond. The Teutonic Knights wheel left and charge Kadan's wing in a desperate counterattack. For a moment it works. Heavy European cavalry smashes into lighter Mongol horsemen, scattering them, killing dozens. The Templars roar in triumph. Then the Mongols flow around them like water around stone. Instead of standing and fighting, they split and circle, firing from all sides. The Teutonic Knights find themselves surrounded, taking arrows from 3 directions at once. They can't catch the Mongols. Their heavy armor and exhausted horses are too slow. They can't retreat. They're cut off. One by one they fall, dragged from saddles, overwhelmed by numbers. Behind the vanguard, Henry's main force dissolves into chaos. Peasant levies see the encirclement forming and panic. Some throw down weapons and run. Others stand frozen in terror. Flemish crossbowmen try to form defensive lines, but Mongol cavalry sweeps through them before they can reload, trampling men into bloody mud. The Mongols set fires. They carry smoke pots and oil-soaked bundles, setting them ablaze across the European rear. Black smoke billows, carried by wind straight into European faces. The smoke isn't just for confusion. It blocks retreat routes, herds the Europeans tighter together, turns them into a concentrated target. Henry fights to reorganize his personal guard, 200 knights, the best warriors in his army. They form a tight circle around his banner, a golden eagle on blue field. For a few minutes they hold, killing every Mongol who comes close. Henry's sword is red to the hilt, but Subutai doesn't need to break them quickly. He just needs to tighten the noose. The collapse comes in waves, like a building falling floor by floor. First, the peasant levies break completely. Thousands of untrained men throw down pikes and shields and run in every direction, only to find Mongol cavalry waiting in every direction. They're ridden down in open field, shot in the back, trampled. Some reach the nearby forests and escape. Most don't. Their bodies pile in drifts. Then the professional infantry buckles. Polish soldiers who've held formation for an hour finally break when Mongol heavy cavalry, lancers in lamella armor riding massive horses, charge directly into their ranks. The impact shatters shields and bones. Men disappear under hooves. The survivors scatter. Now only the knights remain. Isolated groups of armored warriors making last stands across the field. Each group fights with desperate courage. A circle of Saxon mercenaries kills 40 Mongols before being overwhelmed. A wedge of Hospitallers cuts through Mongol lines twice, trying to reach Henry, before being surrounded and annihilated. Henry's banner still stands, surrounded by a shrinking ring of his household guard. They're exhausted, wounded, dying on their feet, but they don't run. Henry fights beside them, sword rising and falling mechanically. His arm is numb. Blood runs down his face from a cut above his eye. The Mongols identify him by his golden crest, the eagle on his surcoat. Subutai has given orders. Commanders are priority targets. Kill the head and the body dies. A detachment of Mongol heavy cavalry closes on Henry's position. The remaining Polish knights charge to meet them. The collision is brief and terrible. When it ends, Henry is pulled from his horse. He fights with a dagger, kills one more Mongol before being struck down. His head is taken as proof of victory. By mid-afternoon, the killing is mostly over. Mongol cavalry hunts down fleeing survivors in the forests and villages beyond. Small groups of Europeans who try to surrender are executed. The Mongols don't take prisoners from armies this size. can't feed them, can't guard them, can't afford mercy. By sunset, 30,000 Europeans lie dead on the field outside Legnica. The Mongols have lost perhaps 2,000 men, most in the initial Templar charges. Subutai's trap has worked exactly as designed. The Mongol army doesn't occupy Legnica, doesn't celebrate. They strip weapons and armor from the dead, tend their wounded, and prepare to march. Messages go south to the Hungarian front, confirming success. The field itself becomes legend. For weeks afterward, locals speak of a plain covered entirely in corpses, of ravens so fat they can't fly, of the smell carrying for kilometers. Henry's body is found days later, beheaded, his golden eagle surcoat torn and bloody. King Wenceslaus arrives with Bohemian reinforcements the next morning, one day too late. When he sees the field, he turns his army around and retreats. There's nothing left to save. The silence is worse than the screaming. 3 days after the battle, the field outside Legnica lies under a pall of black flies and circling ravens. 30,000 bodies rot in the April sun. Polish knights still in dented armor, peasants with their faces in the mud, horses bloating in grotesque parody of life. The smell carries for kilometers, sweet and putrid, seeping into clothing and hair and memory. Local villagers approach in small groups, handkerchiefs pressed to faces, searching for sons and brothers and fathers. Most bodies are unidentifiable, faces destroyed, armor stripped by Mongol scavengers, flesh already corrupting. Women wander through the carnage calling names that will never be answered. Monks from nearby monasteries organize burial details, but there are too many dead. They dig mass graves, blessing thousands at once, trying to preserve some dignity in industrial-scale death. The churches toll their bells continuously for a week. The sound echoes across Silesia like a funeral dirge for an entire generation. In Krakow, when news arrives that Duke Henry is dead, that the army is destroyed, that the Mongols have vanished westward like smoke, panic spreads faster than fire. Nobles barricade themselves in castles. Merchants flee toward Germany. Priests declare the end times have come. Poland is effectively leaderless. Henry's heir is a child. The military infrastructure, trained knights, professional soldiers, the core of medieval power, has been obliterated in a single afternoon. Surrounding kingdoms watch in horror, realizing that if 30,000 warriors couldn't stop 7,000 Mongols, what chance does anyone have? Survivors trickle back to villages over the following weeks, bringing stories that sound like hallucinations. Men speak of arrows falling like rain, of enemy cavalry that moved faster than thought, of smoke that blinded them while horns sounded from every direction. Some survivors never speak again, sitting mute by firesides, staring at nothing. Others drink themselves to death. A few become monks, seeking meaning in catastrophe. The psychological wound cuts deeper than the casualties. Medieval Europe operates on certainty, God's order, feudal hierarchy, the superiority of Christian knights over pagan horsemen. Legnica shatters that certainty. If God's chosen warriors can be massacred by infidels using tactics no one understands, what does that mean? What can it mean? Weeks pass. Spring turns toward summer. The Mongols don't return to Silesia. No one knows why. Rumors circulate. They've been destroyed by another army. They've turned back. They were never that numerous to begin with. The lack of information is almost as terrifying as their presence. Then messengers arrive from Hungary with news that turns terror into something colder and more absolute. Legnica wasn't the main attack. It was never the main attack. It was a diversion. On April 11th, 1241, 2 days after Legnica, the Mongol main army under Batu Khan annihilates the Hungarian forces at the Battle of Mohi. 40,000 Hungarian and Croatian soldiers are slaughtered in a single morning. King Bailith IV barely escapes with his life. The Hungarian kingdom, the strongest power in Central Europe, collapses into chaos. The Mongols burn Pest, then Gran, then systematically devastate everything between the Danube and the Adriatic. It's Legnica, multiplied tenfold, an entire civilization ground to dust. And here's what makes European commanders go cold when they finally understand. Both battles were coordinated. Subutai designed them simultaneously, from a command position hundreds of kilometers away, timed to prevent any possibility of mutual support. While Henry's Polish-German coalition marched toward Legnica, they couldn't reinforce Hungary. While Hungarian forces fought for survival at Mohi, they couldn't help Poland. Subutai split European defenses and destroyed each piece separately. The operational sophistication is unprecedented. Medieval European armies struggled to coordinate forces across 50 kilometers. Subutai orchestrated a campaign across 1,500 kilometers of hostile territory, using relay stations, scouts, and smoke signals to maintain communication between forces that never saw each other. He predicted European movements weeks in advance, prepared battlefields, planted false intelligence, and executed a strategic masterpiece that military historians will study for 8 centuries. Legnica was never about conquering Silesia. It was about fixing Henry's army in place, attracting it, isolating it, destroying it, so it couldn't interfere with the real objective in Hungary. 7,000 Mongols sacrificed operational momentum to annihilate 30,000 Europeans for purely strategic reasons. That's the level of planning Europe faced. When this understanding reaches European courts, the panic intensifies. They weren't defeated by superior numbers or luck. They were manipulated, outthought, played like pieces on a board by a 70-year-old general who treated their best armies like obstacles to be cleared. Preparations begin for total war. The Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick II, normally at odds with the Pope, sends emissaries discussing unified defense. Castles are reinforced, militias organized, prayers offered. Everyone expects the Mongols to return in spring, to cross the Danube, to sweep through Austria and Germany and France until they reach the Atlantic. But the invasion never comes. In December 1241, 9 months after Legnica, Ogedei Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, Supreme Khan of the Mongol Empire, dies in Mongolia. Batu Khan, Subutai, and all the Mongol princes withdraw east to participate in the succession crisis. The invasion of Europe ends not because it failed, but because internal politics demanded it. Europe is saved by accident. The fields outside Legnica are quiet now, covered in wildflowers and grass. Visitors who know the history walk carefully, aware they're treading on bones. A small memorial marks the approximate location where Henry fell. It doesn't mention the 30,000 others, but Legnica's lessons echo across centuries. First, intelligence wins wars before battles begin. Subutai's victory came from reconnaissance, communication, and information superiority. He knew where every European force was located while Henry fought half-blind. Modern militaries study this obsessively. The side that sees first, understands first, acts first, wins. Second, tactics without strategy is noise. Henry's knights were individually formidable, but they fought as disconnected units without unified command or purpose. The Mongols operated as a single organism, every movement coordinated toward one strategic goal. Courage couldn't overcome that systemic advantage. Third, underestimating enemies is fatal. Europeans dismissed Mongols as barbarians right up until the arrows started falling. They assumed cultural superiority meant military superiority. They learned otherwise at catastrophic cost. The gap between perception and reality killed 30,000 men in an afternoon. Fourth, medieval coalition warfare was fatally fragile. Henry's army included Poles, Germans, Templars, Hospitallers, mercenaries, forces with different languages, loyalties, and tactical doctrines. Under pressure, it shattered into fragments. The Mongols, despite coming from dozens of tribes, fought with unity forged through decades of shared campaigns and ruthless discipline. Legnica also reveals something darker about Subutai's genius. He didn't just defeat armies, he broke them psychologically. The feigned retreat, the encirclement, the systematic destruction of hope. These weren't just effective tactics, they were terror weapons. Survivors carried trauma that paralyzed European resistance for years. That was calculated. Subutai understood that destroying one army completely is more effective than defeating 3 armies partially. Henry the Pious died bravely. His knights fought with extraordinary courage. It didn't matter. They were playing checkers against a grandmaster playing chess, competing in a game whose rules they didn't understand. Bravery without understanding is just expensive suicide. The Mongols never returned to Western Europe, but the spectre of Legnica haunted the continent for generations. It entered folk memory as a warning that the world is larger than Christendom imagined, that civilizations can be destroyed in afternoons, that superiority is assumed only by fools. The fields are quiet now, but beneath the soil and wildflowers lie the bones of 30,000 men who learned too late that the Mongols came not for conquest alone, but for domination. And had history turned differently, had Urgadai lived another year, they very nearly succeeded.